I have been a diplomatic observer for the Interstellar Council for 73 cycles, and let me tell you, I thought I had seen everything. Spoiler alert, I had not seen everything. Not even close. My name is Vorkoth, and I'm what you might call a professional witness to galactic stupidity. My species, the Threxians, evolved from pack hunters on a moon with 6 different predator ecosystems. We're good at reading danger, we're excellent at surviving, we're fantastic at knowing when someone is about to do something monumentally idiotic. That day, standing in the Grand Assembly Hall on Station Omega 7, watching representatives from 43 species parade their most dangerous creatures onto the main floor, every single one of my danger receptors was screaming. The whole ridiculous affair had started 3 weeks earlier, when Ambassador Quillnax from the Hectarian Empire decided that the best way to demonstrate military readiness, and I'm quoting here, was to host a summit where each species would bring their apex predator, the idea being that the galaxy would finally understand the true strength of each civilization by witnessing the most dangerous creature their world had produced. Personally, I thought it was the dumbest idea I'd heard since the Vorlons tried to weaponize black holes, but nobody asks the observers for their opinions. We just observe and file reports. Lots and lots of reports. So there I was, standing on the observation deck with my data tablet, watching this parade of teeth, claws and various deadly appendages. The Kryllians had brought a Shadowstalker, a massive creature that could phase through solid matter, and had paralytic venom in all 6 of its stinger tails. The Zephronites wheeled in a containment sphere, holding something that looked like a tornado made of knives and rage. The Morphidians, always trying to outdo everyone, had transported a Void Serpent that could survive in the vacuum of space, and whose bite caused molecular disintegration. You get the picture. Big, scary teeth, death, repeat. Each species gave their presentation with the kind of pride you'd expect from parents at a school science fair, except instead of volcano models, they were showing off creatures that could depopulate small planets. The crowd oohed and ahed appropriately. Security teams sweated profusely. I made notes about insurance liability. Then came the human delegation. Now humans were relatively new to the galactic scene. They'd only been part of the Council for about 8 cycles. Their planet Earth was a Category 7 death world, which meant it was basically a nightmare sphere of competing ecosystems, all trying to kill each other. Naturally, everyone was extremely curious about what apex predator they would bring. The rumors had been spectacular. Some said they'd bring a creature called a hippo, which apparently killed more humans annually than any other large animal. Others whispered about something called a box jellyfish, whose sting could kill in minutes. The betting pools, and yes, there were betting pools, heavily favored something called a polar bear or perhaps a great white shark. Ambassador Keiko Tanaka walked onto the presentation floor with the kind of calm confidence that made my danger receptors twitch. She was a small woman by human standards, with dark hair pulled into a practical bun, and eyes that suggested she found this entire proceeding amusing. Behind her walked another human, a male named Marcus Webb, who was carrying something. The assembly hall went silent. 43 species leaned forward in their seats, or their equivalent of seats, depending on their anatomy. What Marcus carried was small, very small. It was wrapped in what appeared to be a soft blue textile with small yellow patterns on it. Whatever it was made a soft cooing sound. Ambassador Quillnax stood up, his 4 eyes blinking in confusion. Ambassador Tanaka, there seems to be some mistake. The summit parameters clearly stated you were to bring your apex predator, not. He gestured vaguely at the bundle. Whatever that is. Keiko smiled. It was not a reassuring smile. Oh, there's no mistake, Ambassador. We brought exactly what was requested. May I present to you humanity's true apex predator? She nodded at Marcus, who carefully unwrapped the bundle. Inside was a human child. A very small human child. I later learned it was approximately 2.5 years old, which in human development terms is apparently classified as a toddler. The child's name was Emma Sullivan. She had curly blonde hair, enormous blue eyes, and was wearing a bright pink outfit with small white creatures on it. I was informed these were called unicorns, and were fictional beings that humans inexplicably loved. The assembly hall erupted in confusion. Delegates shouted in 17 different languages. Ambassador Kryllians' scales flushed deep purple, which I recognized as Hectarian anger. "This is an insult," Kryllians roared. "You mock this summit by bringing a juvenile of your species, a defenseless infant?" Keiko's smile widened. "Oh, I wouldn't call her defenseless. In fact, I'd argue Emma here is far more dangerous than anything else in this hall. Would you like a demonstration?" Before Kryllians could respond, Emma apparently decided she had been held long enough. She began to squirm in Marcus's arms. He set her down on the floor, and she immediately toddled toward the center of the presentation area, moving with the unsteady gait characteristic of young humans still mastering bipedal locomotion. She looked around at the assembled creatures and delegates with wide eyes, taking in the Shadowstalker, the Void Serpent and the various other implements of destruction on display. Then she pointed at the Kryllian Shadowstalker and said, in a clear, high-pitched voice, "Kitty." She started moving toward it. The Kryllian handler immediately backed away, positioning himself between his apex predator and the approaching toddler. The Shadowstalker, a creature that had evolved to hunt in total darkness and could take down prey 3 times its size, took one look at Emma and retreated to the far corner of its containment area. "That's not a kitty," Marcus called out, though he made no move to retrieve Emma. "That's a Shadowstalker." Emma stopped, considered this information, and then apparently dismissed it as irrelevant. "Big kitty," she declared, and continued her advance. Ambassador Kryllians was now a color I had never seen a Hectarian achieve before. It was somewhere between ultraviolet and panic. "Remove that child immediately. If the Shadowstalker feels threatened, it could what?" Keiko asked pleasantly. "Attack? Go ahead, remove the containment field." Every single being in that assembly hall, and I mean every single one, turned to stare at Keiko as if she had just suggested we all take a pleasant stroll through a supernova. "You cannot be serious," I heard myself saying, forgetting for a moment that observers were supposed to, well, observe. "Completely serious," Keiko replied. "In fact, I insist. Remove all the containment fields. Let's see what happens when the galaxy's apex predators meet humanity's." The next few minutes involved a lot of shouting, several species demanding that the humans be removed from the council, and at least 3 separate attempts to grab Emma and return her to Marcus. Emma, for her part, evaded all capture attempts with the kind of unpredictable movement patterns that made her basically impossible to catch. She seemed to think it was a game, laughing delightedly every time someone lunged for her and missed. Finally, Keiko held up her hand. "Fine. We'll do a control demonstration. Ambassador Kryllians, your Shadowstalker is behind reinforced barriers, correct? Completely contained." Kryllians' scales had settled into a sullen grey. "Of course. It would take military-grade explosives to breach those barriers." "Perfect," Keiko said. "Then there's no danger in letting Emma get a bit closer, is there? The creature is completely contained. What's the worst that could happen?" It was a challenge, and everyone in the hall knew it. Kryllians could either admit that his apex predator might be threatened by a human toddler, or he could maintain that his containment was secure. He chose pride. "Fine," he growled. "Let the infant approach. The Shadowstalker is perfectly contained and perfectly safe." Emma, who had been momentarily distracted by a shiny floor tile, remembered her goal and toddled toward the Shadowstalker's enclosure. The creature, still pressed against the far wall, began making a low whining sound that its handler later told me indicated extreme stress. Emma reached the transparent barrier and pressed her small hands against it. "Hi, kitty," she said brightly. The Shadowstalker whined louder. Then Emma did something that in hindsight I should have seen coming. She wanted to pet the kitty. The barrier was in her way. The barrier needed to stop being in her way, and that's when humanity's true apex predator revealed itself. Emma Sullivan, 2.5 years old, began to have a tantrum. Now, before I continue, I need to explain something about human juveniles that the galaxy was woefully unprepared for. Adult humans are already concerning. They come from a death world where everything is trying to kill them, yet they decided the appropriate response was to domesticate some of those things and make others into pets. They have this peculiar combination of fragility and absolute refusal to acknowledge that fragility. They're persistence hunters who can literally chase prey until it dies of exhaustion. They're terrifying. But human toddlers are something else entirely. It started with a sound. A high-pitched whine that seemed to come from somewhere deep in Emma's chest. Her face, which had been bright and cheerful moments before, turned red. Not the pleasant red of human embarrassment. No, this was the red of volcanic fury, of stars going supernova, of universes collapsing. Uh-oh, Marcus said, with the kind of casual dread that suggested he knew exactly what was coming. Want Kitty? Emma shrieked. I have been present during Hectarian war declarations. I have witnessed Vorlonian death screams. I have heard the mating calls of crystalline. Wait, no, can't use that word. I have heard the mating calls of mineral-based life forms that can shatter steel. None of them, and I mean absolutely none of them, prepared me for the sound that came out of that tiny human. The shriek climbed in both volume and pitch, reaching frequencies that I didn't think human vocal cords could produce. The station's audio sensors actually registered it as a sonic weapon. 3 delegates covered their auditory receptors. The Morphidian ambassador's translator unit simply gave up and displayed error messages. Want to pet the kitty. Each word was punctuated by Emma stomping her small foot against the floor. Except here's the thing about Station Omega-7. It was built to withstand meteor strikes, weapons fire and the docking procedures of species who hadn't quite mastered spatial awareness. It was not, however, built to withstand the resonant frequency produced by a human toddler having a complete meltdown. The floor panels began to vibrate. Emma took a deep breath, and I swear by the ancient stars I saw several military personnel reach for their weapons. She threw herself onto the floor, which should have hurt, but apparently toddlers are made of some kind of impact-resistant material, and began what Marcus later called the full thrash. Her legs kicked, her arms flailed, her head whipped back and forth. And that scream. By the ancestors, that scream just kept going. It was like she had developed a secondary respiratory system specifically for maintaining maximum volume during tantrums. Want Kitty now. The Shadowstalker, this creature that had evolved on a planet with no light, whose hunting instincts were honed over millions of years, whose kill count was in the thousands, pressed itself so hard against the back of its enclosure that its handler became genuinely concerned it might phase through the wall and escape into space just to get away from the noise. Ambassador Quilnax tried to speak, but Emma's screaming simply drowned him out. He gestured frantically at his security team, who I assume was supposed to do something, but they just stood there looking utterly lost. What were they going to do? Shoot the tiny human? Stun her? These were trained military personnel who had faced down insurgencies and border conflicts, and they were completely paralyzed by 40 pounds of angry human child. Keiko just stood there, arms crossed, watching with the expression of someone proving a very important point. Emma, not getting the response she wanted from simply screaming and thrashing, escalated. She sat up, grabbed the nearest object, which happened to be a decorative plant in a pot, and hurled it. Her aim was terrible. Her throwing technique was non-existent. The pot sailed through the air in a wobbly arc and smashed against the Shadowstalker's enclosure. The transparent barrier, which had been rated to withstand plasma weapons, developed a small crack. Every being in that assembly hall stopped breathing. Well, those of us who breathed, the non-breathers, stopped whatever their equivalent was. Did that child just damage reinforced plasma-resistant barriers by throwing a plant? I heard myself whisper into my recording device. Emma, encouraged by the results of her pottery-based assault, looked around for more ammunition. She found Marcus's data tablet, which he had foolishly set down within her reach. Emma, no, Marcus said, but it was the kind of weak protest that suggested he knew it was already too late. Emma, yes, she screamed, and launched the tablet like a missile. This one hit dead center. The crack in the barrier grew larger. The Kryllian handler started shouting something in his native language that my translator helpfully informed me was a combination of swear words and prayers to 17 different deities. Quilnax finally found his voice. Stop her. Someone stop that creature immediately. 3 security officers moved forward. Emma saw them coming, her eyes, still streaming with tears of fury, narrowed. She grabbed her own shoe, which had somehow come off during the thrashing, and threw it at the nearest officer. It bounced harmlessly off his armor. Emma screamed louder, apparently offended that her shoe had been ineffective. Then she discovered she had another shoe. The second shoe, thrown with the wild abandon of someone who has absolutely no concept of consequences, sailed over the officers' heads and hit the control panel for the Shadowstalker's enclosure. Sparks flew, alarms began to wail, and the containment field flickered. "Oh no," said every being in the hall simultaneously. The Shadowstalker, seeing its chance for escape, lunged forward. The weakened barrier shattered. The creature burst free in a shower of transparent fragments, its 6 stinger tails already raised to strike, its mandibles spread wide, every inch of its screaming apex predator ready to kill everything in sight. It took exactly 3 steps before it saw Emma still screaming on the floor. Now with both shoes off and considering throwing them again, the Shadowstalker stopped. It tilted its head, which I didn't even know Shadowstalkers could do. It looked at Emma. It looked at the assembled delegates. It looked back at Emma, who had stopped screaming just long enough to point at it and yelled, "Bad kitty, no, run away." Then this creature, this apex predator from a planet where the dominant life strategy was extreme aggression, this thing that had killed Kryllian warriors and eaten them, did something I would not have believed if I hadn't seen it with my own 16 eyes. It whimpered. Then it turned around, phased through the wall of the assembly hall, and disappeared into the station's infrastructure. The silence that followed was absolutely profound. Emma, satisfied that the kitty had been properly scolded, stopped crying. Her face returned to its normal color. She sniffled once, wiped her nose on her sleeve in a gesture that somehow made several delegates recoil, and said in a perfectly calm voice, "Juice?" Marcus, moving like someone in a dream, pulled a small container from his bag and handed it to her. Emma took it, stuck the attached straw in her mouth, and began drinking contentedly, as if she hadn't just caused a containment breach and psychological trauma to her apex predator. Keiko finally broke the silence. "So, Ambassador Kryllians, I believe we've demonstrated our apex predator. Emma here is operating at about 30% of her capability. She's not even sleepy yet. Would you like to see what happens when she's tired and cranky?" Kryllians had achieved a color that I don't think exists in standard Hectarian chromatic range. He tried to speak 3 times before any sound came out. That thing. She destroyed military-grade containment and caused a Shadowstalker to flee in terror. "She wanted to pet your kitty," Keiko said with a shrug. "We told you, humanity's apex predator. Nothing stops a toddler who wants something badly enough. Not walls, not reason, not appeals to logic or consequences. Emma doesn't understand that she can't do something, so she just does it anyway. Every human starts like this. We all go through this phase. Some of us never really grow out of it." "You're all insane," breathed the Morphidian ambassador. "Probably," Marcus agreed, while Emma finished her juice and then held out the empty container. No more juice, Emma, we're going home soon." Emma's face began to turn red again. "I have emergency juice," Keiko shouted, producing another container with the speed of someone defusing a bomb. Emma's face returned to normal. Crisis averted. I looked around the assembly hall. The Zephyrnite's knife tornado had retreated into its containment sphere and refused to come out. The Void Serpent had somehow tied itself into a knot. Various other apex predators were displaying behavior that could only be described as deeply disturbed. And in the center of it all stood Emma Sullivan, sipping juice, one shoe on and one shoe off, completely oblivious to the chaos she had caused. Ambassador Kryllians slowly sat down. "The summit is concluded," he said in a hollow voice. "Humans win. Please take your apex predator and go." "Pleasure doing business with you," Keiko said cheerfully. She nodded at Marcus, who picked up Emma. The child waved at the assembled delegates with her free hand. "Bye-bye," she called out. "Bye-bye, scary kitties." As they walked out of the hall, I heard Emma asking Marcus if they could get a kitty at home. Marcus's response of "we'll see" made Keiko laugh. The cleanup took 3 days. The Shadowstalker was eventually found hiding in a ventilation shaft, still traumatized. The other predators had to be coaxed back to their normal behavioral patterns. Station Omega-7 required significant repairs, and the insurance claims were monumentally complicated. As for me, I filed my report. It was the strangest report I had ever written. The title was simple: Threat Assessment, Human Juveniles, Category Apocalyptic. The Interstellar Council read it, debated it, and eventually passed Resolution 7043, which formally banned human children under the age of 5 from all diplomatic functions, military installations, and any location classified as secure. The humans accepted this, with good grace. I think they were relieved, honestly. And that's how a human toddler, having a tantrum, became the most feared apex predator in the galaxy. Sometimes the scariest things come in the smallest packages. Sometimes the greatest weapons don't have teeth or claws or venom. Sometimes they just have wants, needs, and absolutely no understanding of the word impossible. I never did find out if Emma got her kitty. But I know the Shadowstalker still has nightmares.